The nurse walked into the room and told me that if I don't get up and start walking again, they will cut my leg off. You see, bedside manners were not exactly high priority under communism. I was 6 years old and had been in the hospital for several weeks with severe second and third degree burns on 20% of my body. Just a few days earlier, another nurse slapped me when I would not start crying, when a doctor was trying to remove a bandage that was left on me for so long that it completely stuck to my body. As the doctor was trying to pull the bandage away, it was ripping into my flesh. It felt as if he was skinning me alive. Yet they gave me no anesthetics and no painkillers. But having endured that kind of excruciating pain so early on taught me my strength. And strength was essential in order to survive under Nicolae Ceaușescu, the ruthless communist dictator that ruled Romania with an iron fist for about a quarter of a century. Today, I will share with you some of our experiences under the oppressive regime, our journey from Romania to the Magic Valley, the successes we achieved in our pursuit of the American dream, and the many challenges we had to overcome, including challenges we faced since we immigrated to the US. Ceausescu came to power a couple of years before I was born, and he was executed just months before we left Romania for the US. His regime was notorious for egregious human rights violations. There was no freedom of speech, no freedom of the press, no freedom of religion, no privacy, and no intellectual freedom. Ceausescu isolated the country. He locked down the borders. He restricted the movement of people and the flow of information in and out of the country. He imprisoned, tortured, and killed thousands and thousands. Many risked their lives trying to escape, and many died trying to cross the border. So if you're wondering, how did he manage to terrorize an entire country for over 2 decades? Well, initially, he made people believe that he will make their lives better. And those were difficult economic times, so people believed him. Then, once in power, some things he changed overnight with a stroke of a pen. But much of it was slow and insidious. Ceausescu took away people's rights one by one. He consolidated power on the top: the state, the party, the police, the judiciary, the military, all became tools of his oppression. He was brutal. He kept the country in fear with the help of the Securitate, which was the Romanian secret police, and through an elaborate network of spies and snitches, where family snitched on family, neighbors snitched on neighbors, doctors snitched on their patients, and students snitched on their teachers. Ceausescu put his friends and family in powerful positions. While real scientists were persecuted, his wife was given high-level positions, including deputy prime minister, and she was given a fake doctoral degree in chemistry. She had to be referred to as Tovarășa Academician Doctor Engineer Elena Ceaușescu. And it wasn't just Elena's credentials that were fabricated. History was rewritten. Even history was censored. We had the best and bravest heroes. Our country was the greatest. Communism was the greatest. The dictator was the greatest. Lies and corruption were the norm in communist Romania. While people were living in poverty, state-controlled media spread vital propaganda about how wonderful things were. They called it Epoca de Aur, the golden era. In reality, there was nothing golden about the golden era. Food was rationed. We had to stand in line for hours and hours for just about everything: for bread, for meat, for eggs, for oil, for sugar, for clothes. In the city, electricity, hot water, and heat was regularly cut off. And while people were suffering, Ceausescu and his family lived a life of luxury. They lived in lavish palaces with lavish furniture, a life of self-indulgence. Ceausescu loved gold and gold-plated things. Even his bathroom fixtures were gold. He was also an egomaniac. His pictures were everywhere, in every classroom, right in the front, above the blackboard, in every government office. Even the first page of every one of our textbooks had his pictures. He was also very sensitive about how he looked in those pictures. So people had to be very careful to make sure that they only used flattering pictures of him. When he visited places, big cheerful crowds had to be out, clapping, chanting, cheering. Participation was mandatory. You could lose your job and even be arrested if you refused to participate. There he is with Nixon, with Fidel Castro, and Saddam Hussein. Ceausescu was obsessed with being the leader of a great and populous country. Out of this obsession was born with one of the most draconian pro-natalist policies. In 1966, Ceausescu signed into law Decree 770 that criminalized abortion. Women who gave birth and raised more than 10 children, they were declared heroine mothers. On the other hand, individuals, childless individuals, age 25 and older, they were hit with a celibacy tax that was deducted from their paychecks every month. Condoms and all means of contraception became legally unavailable. Eventually, a black market developed, and these products were smuggled into the country from abroad, but most people could not afford them. The fertility of women was under constant surveillance, including subjecting women to random mandatory gynecological exams. Sometimes state officials were present during these examinations. Women called them the menstrual police. A miscarriage could be a death sentence. Women who suffered miscarriages were accused of trying to self-induce abortion. And they were threatened with prison and even refused medical care, even if they were bleeding out, unless and until they confessed to trying to abort and named one person that helped them. Forcing these women to choose between death or sending an innocent person to prison was the definition of pure evil. So did the law put an end to abortion? No, it did not. What it did do, however, it did greatly increase the mortality rate for women. Thousands and thousands of women died. Many left orphans behind. Sometimes when women gave birth to children that they didn't want and they couldn't afford, they left them at orphanages. The conditions in these orphanages were deplorable and inhumane. These were the children of heroine mothers born in the golden era. But this was only one aspect of the oppressive regime. Ceausescu persecuted minority groups and pretty much anybody and everybody who dared to speak up and stand up against the regime. My mother became the target of relentless persecution. She was falsely accused and forced to go through a sham trial that lasted several years. They made it into a public circus in order to scare others. Sometimes, instead of holding the hearings at the courthouse, they held them at the community center and invited the whole town to attend. They sent police to escort my mother through town to these hearings. They threatened everybody who refused to sign declarations that were written by the police that contained false allegations against my mother. There was only one man who was brave enough to testify on the stand that he didn't write or sign the declaration that the police claimed he did. You see, when the police and the judicial system are beholden to the same dictator. Those who are targeted, they have no chance. They have no opportunity for redress. The whole ordeal took a toll on my mother and on our entire family, and that is when my parents decided to submit an application for us to immigrate to the United States. But it took years before Romania allowed us to leave. Finally, in 1989, people had enough. A revolution broke out. The dictator and his wife were captured, promptly tried and convicted by a military tribunal, and executed by a firing squad, Christmas Day, 1989. So you would think once the dictator was dead, everything became better overnight. But it did not. This is how my hometown looks during peacetime. This is how it looked March 20th, 1990. Just a few months earlier, the country was united in fighting against one of the most brutal dictators. Romanians and Hungarians were fighting side by side against a common enemy. Yet, just a few months later, they were fighting against each other. Those in power used the tried and true technique and turned Romanians against Hungarians. We heard the roar of the crowd as it came down the street, chanting, "Death to Hungarians, death to Hungarians." We looked out of our bathroom window, and there he was, our friend and co-worker, leading the march and chanting. We thought we were friends. He was Romanian, we were Hungarians. We worked together. We attended his wedding, he attended our wedding. We would go out together. Yet there he was, chanting "Death to Hungarians" with the rest of them. Next came a bloody confrontation downtown, where Romanians and Hungarians were fighting each other with sticks, axes, and shovels. Several were killed, many, many injured. Finally, in May 1990, we left Romania by train. I was 7 months pregnant. We had no money, only a couple of suitcases filled with clothes and some favorite Hungarian books. We hid our prized possession very carefully in our luggage, our high school diplomas and our wedding rings. We had to go to Rome, Italy first, where we were processed, and we had to go through all kinds of medical tests. The doctor told me that because I was pregnant, I was not able to fly, so we had to stay there until I had our son. Robert was born in Rome, Italy, in a Catholic hospital. When one of the doctors saw that I had nothing for the baby, she bought some formulas, some baby bottles, some diapers, even some baby clothes. I will never forget her kindness. We arrived to Twin Falls in July 1990. Robert was about a week old. We came through the College of Southern Idaho Refugee Center. The center helped us with some basic things like renting our first apartment. But we got our first TV, our first hair dryer, and even some of Robert's clothes and toys out of dumpsters from around the neighborhood. Sadly, we did not have a good, positive experience with the CSI Refugee Center. Our dream was to attend college, but Refugee Center staff tried to prevent us from attending college. They told us that we had to go to work instead. But we knew that we could do both because my mother had 3 kids, worked full-time while attending medical school. I didn't know at the time, but many of CSI's non-refugee students also work either part-time or full-time while attending college. But the center only cared about putting refugees in a job, any job, regardless of the person's background, education, skills, and hopes and dreams. However, we didn't allow the Refugee Center to hold us back. We went and took the college entrance exam in secret, against their warnings. Within 6 months, both my husband and I were attending CSI full-time during the day and working full-time graveyard shift at Universal Frozen Foods. By May 1996, less than 6 years after arriving to the United States, we both graduated from Washington State University, my husband with a bachelor's degree and a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree, and I with 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's in business administration. After graduation, we decided to come back to Twin Falls. Within 2 years, my husband opened his own veterinary clinic with the help of a small business administration loan, and I started working for the College of Southern Idaho, first as ITC director, then as library director, and later as one of the vice presidents. During this time, I also earned a second master's degree and a doctoral degree while working full-time. We worked very, very hard, but we also took every opportunity to give back to this community. Unfortunately, in 2013, right before Christmas, my strength was tested again when I was notified via email that CSI's new president intended to fire me. I was absolutely devastated. I worked for the college for 17 years, and I put my heart and soul into my job. It was so unfair and so unjust that I decided to fight back, just like my parents did in communist Romania. First, I filed a complaint with the Idaho Human Rights Commission, and then I filed a lawsuit against the college. When my case became public, so many women came to me with their stories, their heartbreaking stories of discrimination, retaliation, and harassment. Their stories and my personal experiences made me go back to school to become a civil rights and employment law attorney. I have about a year left, a little bit over a year left of law school. My experiences over the years taught me the importance of having a backbone, the courage to speak the truth and to fight injustice. Because after all, it is not the challenges that we face, but the challenges that we overcome that define us. Thank you.